Good morning, Luke.
Good morning, Florence. So you've been taking a look at the French press, hot off the press, and one of the top stories is one of the headlines we've been covering here at France 24, and that's the death of a very famous lawyer. Perhaps he wasn't famous, he was famous for possibly the wrong reasons. He died, Jacques Vergès, at the age of 88.
That's right. Well, a lot of papers are paying tribute to him, calling him France's most famous and also most controversial lawyer. He himself defined himself as an enlightened scumbag. Now, here's a photo of him. So he was famous right off the bat. He was a resistant during World War II. Then he was famous as an anti-colonialist and a communist figure. But then he became a lawyer and started defending a string of, well, sometimes very shady clients, which earned him the title of the devil's advocate, the reputation of being to defend the undefendable. So just to give you an idea of some of his clients, well, there was the Nazi Klaus Barbie, the Khmer Rouge leader Pol Pot, Carlos the Jackal, the former Serbian president Slobodan Milosevic. So pretty impressive list there.
A star team of not very nice people from the 20th century.
Absolutely. And most recently, it was the former president of Ivory Coast, Laurent Gbagbo. So very controversial, very mysterious as well. At one point in the 1970s, he disappeared for 10 years, came back, but he never told anybody what he'd done during those 10 years. So very mysterious man. Now, Le Parisien comes back on an interview he gave about 6 months ago where he talked about how he would like to be celebrated after his death. And here was his response, so it gives you a good idea about his character. He says, "I want the 2 or 3 people who love me to bury me, but if any of those two-faced politicians try to exploit my death in any way, well, this is what I have to say to them: be more dignified." So politicians, be warned.
Pretty hard-hitting all the way to the end there. In other news in the French press, and that's another story that we can't get away from, really, and that's the unrest in Egypt.
Absolutely. It's still grabbing the front pages today. A lot of very impressive photos. Let's look at Le Figaro. It says, in Egypt, the Islamists are crushed by the army, and their photo taken on the streets of Cairo there. Le Monde has a double-page spread, hour-by-hour account of when Cairo became what it calls a war zone. It's a really chilling read. And as I was saying, there's some very impressive photos. Let's, if we can get a zoom in on one of them. This is a makeshift morgue, and you can see there the bodies just piled up in this room in a hospital in Cairo. Now, Libération calls this a state massacre. That's on the front page today, and also has very shocking photos inside, rows of bodies, people mourning their death. They have, they're really focusing on the aftermath of Wednesday's crackdown, especially in hospitals, the chaotic scenes, according to Libération. And sometimes things can get very tense between victims' families and the hospital staff. And Libération points out that a lot of families feel like the hospital wasn't really doing enough to help their loved ones, and perhaps for political reasons, perhaps because these were Muslim Brotherhood supporters. For instance, Libération says that in one hospital there were 500 beds, but only 300 people were being treated.
Now, of course, the outcry has been pretty much universal around the world, and the condemnation of the Egyptian army continuing the French left-wing newspaper Libération.
That's right. Their editorial calls this a butchering. It says there's no doubt about what's going on here. This is the army after ousting the first democratically elected president in Egypt. It's deliberately executed hundreds of its citizens, so very harsh words. And it says, look, a massacre is a massacre. You can't be selective in your indignations. Sure, the Muslim Brotherhood may not be your ideal freedom fighter, especially from a Western point of view, but these are citizens that are being put down like dogs.
No beating about the bush there from Libération. Moving on to a very different topic, and it is the holiday season, the vacation season here in France. Even more so yesterday, August 15th, that was another bank holiday, a public holiday. Everything was closed. That was for the Catholics celebrating the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. Tell us more.
Absolutely. Well, so the 15th of August.
I've always been slightly confused as to what happens on the 15th of August.
Well, I'm not quite sure exactly what happens, but it's a day off. And a lot of Catholics celebrate by going on a pilgrimage to a site where the Virgin Mary was seen, such as Lourdes, or to Rocamadour. This is a famous town here in France. Now, there's a very famous statue of the Virgin Mary. It's a wooden Black Madonna that's said to be miraculous. And it's interesting because both Libération and Le Figaro sent their journalists there. And Le Figaro, for instance, says that the town has seen a real resurrection in the last 15 years. More and more tourists come, especially pilgrims. Supposedly there were a lot of pilgrims there yesterday. And Libération points out that, well, this resurrection has a lot to do with the bishop that's in charge of the region that Rocamadour is in. And he's really done a kind of a marketing campaign to boost religious tourism, basically trying to give Rocamadour back its religious significance. Now, Libération says this is kind of systematic of a broader strategy from the Catholic Church. They call this marketing church style, trying to give these cities back their religious significance.
Florence Villeminot, thank you very much. That was the French Press Review. You're watching France 24 live from Paris. More news and headlines just after the break. Do stay tuned.